the original Plants vs Zombies was a golden age for the franchise, then what came next was complicated. PopCap had created something truly special, and naturally, EA saw the potential for expansion, but we have already talked about this deal and how EA influenced all the franchise since then in the first part of this video. Now we are going to explore how every sequels and spin-offs tried to become great hits, or at least try to save the franchise. But as history has shown time and time again, also with games like Angry Birds or Fruit Ninja, when a small game became so successful and beloved, it's never easy to keep it on the right track. In 2013, 4 years after the original game's release, Plants vs Zombies 2 It's About Time finally launched, and at first glance, it seemed like everything fans could have wanted. More plants, more zombies, new worlds, and an expanded story that took players through different historical time periods. But there was one major difference. Plants vs Zombies 2 was free to play, and that changed everything. Instead of a one-time purchase, Plants vs Zombies 2 introduced energy systems, paywall content, and an increasingly aggressive monetization model. Certain plants, which were previously core mechanics in the first game, were now locked behind premium purchases. Want to progress faster? You could, if you were willing to pay for it. The challenge was no longer just about strategy. It was about how much money you were willing to spend. It wasn't all bad. Plants vs Zombies 2 still had the core mechanics that made the original great, and the new worlds added variety and creativity. But something has shifted. The charm of the first game, where everything was accessible and balanced, was now clouded by in-app purchases and grind-heavy mechanics. EA's influence was becoming more obvious, and long-time fans were starting to notice. In 2014, EA took the franchise in a completely different direction with Plants vs Zombies Garden Warfare. Instead of a tower defense game, it was a third-person shooter. A Plants vs Zombies shooter? It sounded ridiculous at first, but surprisingly, it worked. Garden Warfare was well received for its fun, chaotic gameplay, a unique take on the shooter genre. Rather than realistic war zones, it had colorful maps, wacky characters, and plenty of humor. It took inspiration from class-based shooters like Team Fortress 2 and brought something fresh to the table. EA quickly capitalized on its success with Garden Warfare 2, which added more content, new classes, and even a single-player mode. It had depth, variety, and a dedicated fanbase. But despite its quality, EA made some questionable choices. Microtransactions became more aggressive, and updates became less frequent. Then, in 2019, EA tried to push the franchise even further with Plants vs Zombies Battle for Neighborville. Unfortunately, this time, the magic didn't quite land. While it had a bigger world and more customization, it lacked the charm and balance of Garden Warfare. It felt like EA was trying too hard to turn Plants vs Zombies in a live service game, rather than refining what had already worked. In 2016, PopCap took the Plants vs Zombies franchise in a new direction with Plants vs Zombies Heroes, a collectible card game that mixes strategy deck building with the classic Plants vs Zombies charm. Unlike the traditional tower defense formula, this game played more like Hearthstone or Clash Royale, where players build decks using Plants or Zombies cards and battle in turn-based matches. What made it unique was its lane-based combat system, which stayed true to the Plants vs Zombies roots while adding new layers of strategy. Players could choose from different heroes, each with their own special abilities, which added more depth and variety to the gameplay. At launch, Plants vs Zombies Heroes was well received. Fans appreciated the fresh take on the franchise, and the game had a strong balance between casual fun and competitive depth. It also avoided the overly aggressive monetization that Plants vs Zombies 2 was criticized for, making it a more enjoyable experience for players who didn't want to spend money. However, despite its potential, Plants vs Zombies Heroes never reached mainstream success. One major issue was EA's lack of long-term support. While the game received updates and new content at first, this slowed down over time. The community grew frustrated as balance changes and fresh content became rare, making the game feel abandoned. Eventually, Plants vs Zombies stopped receiving major updates altogether, and EA shifted its focus to other projects. Today, it still has a small but dedicated fanbase, but it's clear that it was never given the attention it needed to thrive. It stands as an interesting experiment in the Plants vs. Zombies universe, one that could have been something much bigger if it had been properly supported. Like many other spin-offs in the franchise, it showed great potential but ended up being left behind. Another casualty of EA's handling of Plants vs. Zombies. While Garden Warfare was doing its own thing, the mobile side of Plants vs. Zombies wasn't looking great. Plants vs. Zombies 2 continued receiving updates, but each one came with more pay-to-win mechanics and frustrating design choices. Then came Plants vs. Zombies 3, or at least what EA called Plants vs. Zombies 3. Initially soft launched in 2020, Plants vs. Zombies 3 was an attempt to modernize the franchise, but in all the wrong ways. Gone were the classic 2D art style and familiar mechanics. Instead, the game had a vertical layout, simplified gameplay, and, unsurprisingly, a heavy emphasis on microtransactions. The fans' response? Overwhelmingly negative. Players criticized the generic mobile game feel, the lack of strategy, and the soulless monetization. EA eventually pulled the game back into development, promising improvements, but as of now, Plants vs. Zombies 3 remains a shadow of its former self, struggling to recapture what made the franchise great. So, where does that leave Plants vs. Zombies today? The franchise is still technically alive, but it's clear that EA has no idea what to do with it. Plants vs. Zombies 2 continue to receive occasional updates, but its best years are long behind it. Garden Warfare's momentum faded, and Battle for Neighborville didn't generate the excitement EA hoped for. And Plants vs. Zombies 3? Well, it might not even make a proper return. Fans of the original game are left wondering if the franchise will ever go back to its roots. Could we see a true Plants vs. Zombies 1 remastered, or a real sequel that captured the spirit of the first game? Right now, it seems unlikely. EA's focus has always been on maximizing profit, and unless there's a way to make a ton of money from a Plants vs. Zombies revival, they probably won't take that risk. But despite everything, the legacy of Plants vs. Zombies remains strong. It's still one of the most beloved strategy games of all time. Even if EA continues to ruin the franchise, fans will always remember the magic of the first game, the charm, the humor, the perfectly balanced gameplay. The world of mobile games has changed a lot since its first launch, but there's still place for it to make a comeback. In the end, Plants vs. Zombies might not be as popular as it once was, but it will always have a place in the hearts of those who grew up with it. Whether or not it can return to its former glory is uncertain, but one thing's for sure, it's a franchise that will never be forgotten. That's it for the second part of the deep dive into what for me is one of the best mobile games ever. Do you think Plants vs. Zombies can make a comeback? Make sure to drop a like and subscribe, and leave a comment below and let me know if you liked it and if you want to see another deep dive into some other games. I'll see you in the next video.